Hello, and welcome to The Poor Generation, the show that inspires the present and future generations to take a deeper look at their lives to see how their gifts and passions can be used to pour back into the world around them. I'm your host, Alex Pasley, and in today's episode, we will talk about whole life success with our guest, Cheri Gregov. We will discuss the ins and outs of being successful in our career and our home life. If you are new to the podcast or tuning back in, I would like to thank you so much for stopping by. If you are enjoying the podcast, please do me a huge favor and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. The reviews really help this podcast to grow, and it helps to reach other listeners. Cheri, welcome to The Poor Generation. We are so blessed to have you on today's show. So let's jump right into it. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, Alex, thank you so much for having me. As I've said to you, you are shepherding this podcast and you are blessing every set of ears that it reaches. So thank you for spreading that message of just pouring back into this world. It's a message that our world needs to hear, I think. So thank you for that. But yeah, so my name is Cheri. I'm from New York originally. I live in New Jersey now. I'm a wife and I'm a mom of two boys who I love dearly. And I've worked in the corporate world for over 20 years at the largest firm in my industry. And I've realized that my favorite part of my work as a chief operating officer is really coaching. So I've been leaning into that in the last couple of years. And I started my own business where I'm really doing a mix of really performance coaching, life coaching, and business consulting. And that's just kind of lit me up. It's been a great ride.
Wow, kudos to you, Cheri. I know that can be a lot to take on. It's such a blessing seeing you pour back into this world. I have a 1 year old, so trying to work and be a husband and a father can be a little bit hectic sometimes. So seeing you work and create your own business, plus you have two children, man, you're really just like a super mom.
I often say it's a God thing. Like,
Yeah.
I think if you look at it on paper, if you had told me a few years ago what I would be doing right now, I'd say, how? It's just not possible. But I do think sometimes we put our own limits on our time, on our energy. And really, when you're in that state of flow, I think when you're following your calling, it just multiplies. And
Wow.
it's actually unbelievable, I think, what we can accomplish if we are open to it.
So, what is your definition of purpose?
Yeah, so I look at purpose as really finding that activity, for many it might be work that makes you feel fulfilled, that's rewarding. You can think about, they describe it as like a state of flow where, and you might experience it when you're playing a sport. For me, it could be dance, but where it's almost like time and space slip away and you just feel like you're using your God-given talents or your special gifts and you're doing what you're meant to be doing. I think that's purpose. And it's funny, I think with our work, sometimes there's this connotation of work has to be hard work. We've kind of lost the concept of what if work was really just applying our talent? That is, and sometimes it sounds like a dream, like, oh, you can do what you love, but then you also have to, you know, make that paycheck and do the things that you don't want to do. And I don't think that's true. I don't think that's the whole story. So I think purpose is finding that work, that activity that fills you up rather than depletes you.
Yeah, I can definitely relate. I like my current job, but I felt like something was missing. And so that's why I started the podcast because it allowed me to serve and to give back to my community. So, how did you discover your purpose?
So I would say over the course of my life, that's evolved, right? So probably my first purpose was, growing up, there was a big emphasis on education, as this is, how you find your way in the world, how you get security, safety. So my first purpose, I think, was like getting the best education possible, knowing we really didn't have much resources to do so. And that can be fulfilling, that can give you a drive. Then I think as I started in my career in the workplace, I took on that identity as being that successful professional that felt like somewhat of a purpose. Then, of course, came marriage and children that gives you a different lens of purpose. But really, what stands out to me, Alex, is, we were struck with the pandemic and quarantine, kind of forced this big pause for everyone. That, there's, of course, silver linings that came with all the heartache around the pandemic. But for me, it was a chance to take a really good, hard look in the mirror. And I will tell you, I did not like everything that I saw. I think looking back on that time, one could say I had a lot of success, but it felt a little hollow. And I noticed it in my behaviors, like almost a symptoms of being out of alignment with what was most important to me. So that would show up as, losing my temper with my kids over something silly. And you're thinking like, why am I doing this? Or, griping, complaining, and thinking, I'm so blessed. Like, why? What is happening here? And those are all like indicators that something is off. So for me, that kind of began a major transformation. And step one was really doubling down on my faith. So I had always been a spiritual person, and, it was kind of part of my values, but I think it had become, the values that are like on the shelf that you like sometimes take down and live, but not really a lifestyle. So I think in those challenging times, I just, really clung to that. And that helped really pull me out of what felt like a bit of a pit. So that was step one. So once I kind of got solid more in my faith, turning back to my relationships and looking really to serve, love others, and step out of myself a bit, um, opened the door to just more self-care, taking care of my health all around, helping with perspective. And then living through that transformation, I felt this big calling to help others go through the same. So if I could find this new peace of mind, this new clarity, and this new calling to really serve others, you could say in my corporate career, I was serving my team, my business. But much like you shared with your experience, it seemed like there was something bigger, like there was a more direct way that I could really have an impact. And I felt like going through that journey myself, I just am so energized to bring others along because it's, we get this one life and it can be so good. So it kind of hurts when you see people in pain. We all have a level of pain, but to know that that healing is on the other side, like I want us all to get there.
Yeah, I hope we all get there too. So, how do we release career pressure?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one I know is so common that we all struggle with. So where I would start is, I think sometimes we have these grand expectations, and usually how you can find it showing up, whether it's in your own thoughts or things you say about your life, your career, is shoulds. Like, I should have been at this corporate title by now, or I should be earning this, or I should be married by now. I should have 2.5 kids by now. We put these like weird standards on ourselves. And sometimes I think it's just falling into the pattern of the times or conforming to this world, kind of the earthly way of, comparing notes on whatever metric is easily measured and visible. But I think all those shoulds that we pour over ourselves, they just lead to like shame, they lead to stress, and sometimes this constant striving or toiling for achievement, for some kind of external validation to tell us like, yes, you are enough. So I think the big driver there is just to learn to release it. And I know that sounds like easier said than done, but I think how to do that is to really embrace like where you are in this moment, and to really absorb that like you are enough and you are loved and you are forgiven. And that is the beginning to unlocking this need to strive and toil and get that external validation for just simply who you are. So I think it's releasing the shoulds.
Now, what if somebody's thinking, okay, well, I will try to be more present in the now and to release the stress, but I'm currently not being fulfilled at my job and I'm just living for the weekends. What would you tell that person?
Yes. So first off, it's so common, right? And I will say there are folks out there, if you're tuning into other podcasts or reading books, some of them right off the bat will say, Alex, you got to quit that job. Just walk out today. Others will say, oh, lean into your work, double down on the work and let everything else drop. So I will say, first off, there's no one formula for like stay or go, right? But what I would encourage anyone in that spot is to just try to broaden the perspective. Sometimes we get so narrow in on, I should be here by now. I'm not. This isn't the place for me. I'm so miserable here. And it can kind of, those thoughts will just get that downward spiral going. So one thing I always suggest with my clients is like, let's evaluate, like, what are the things that you love about your work? What are the things that you don't love so much? How can you reshape even the role that you're in right now? How can you lean into and emphasize the things that you love? I always think that step one is to just see how can you, do some tweaks to see if where you are actually could be the best place for you. But staying open to possibilities of it's probably not stay or go. There's probably 20 different scenarios in there that if you can get creative and think about just adjusting the dial, that is helpful to do. But you also mentioned like living for the weekends. That's another one that just gets me. And I know it's so common, right? It's like, is it 5 o'clock? Is it Saturday? When's my next vacation? How many years to retirement? Like the number of people I speak to who know the number of months, to retirement, I'm thinking, wow, sometimes we wish away our lives. I mean, I know that sounds brutal, but it is a gut check that I think we all need to hear. So what I would say is you are in the driver's seat of your life so much more than you realize. So like, just take a pause and step back. And if you could design like your dream day, what would that look like? And that might sound so out there, like, yeah, I wish, like, what do you mean? And you're gonna have to push past the like sipping, a drink out of a coconut on a beach. Like, I don't mean that kind of day. I mean like your everyday, right? Like that's not enough. You want more. So what would that day look like? And I think what you'll find is there's ways to start stepping into that day right now. Like you can start being that person today in the job that you're in that might be hanging on you. You can start moving towards that. And I think as you start to kind of get the flywheel going, it's going to build your momentum of realizing like, hey, I can design my day. Hey, more of this is under my control than I even realized.
Okay, that's awesome. So was there a point where you had to take a leap of faith?
It's a total leap of faith. As
Okay,
all things that are worthwhile.
for sure. You just sound so confident in it, which is great. And I can tell how much it means to you just by speaking. You're just glowing with when you talk about it. So
Yeah.
I didn't know if it was some type of leap of
Oh,
faith.
yeah. There's so many chapters to it, Alex, but I'll give you just like a couple of highlights. So I think even as I was exploring, additional training, certification, some significant investments, by the way, to be made. And I'm thinking to myself, is this like selfish that I'm feeling, I feel this desire and to follow this, is it reckless? These are some of the things I share it because they go through all of our minds. Like, is this reckless to move from my, stable corporate job to consider entrepreneurship? And I feel this as a strong desire for me, is this, self-serving or, the wrong path? And so listen, I prayed a lot. And I asked God, I said, listen, whatever your will is, like, I feel this strong, like, draw to it, but you tell me, like, if this is the season of life, this is what you want me to do? Like, and I prayed for him to open and close doors. I said, whatever it is, I'm good either way. You want me to stay put? I'm good. You want me to go now? Take the leap of faith. I will do it. And I will tell you as clear as day, he opened doors to make logistics, everything just kind of fall into place to go ahead and do this training and get certified. And I was like, well, now I'm all in.
Yeah.
And one thing I would say on that, even just the word desire, if you look at the meaning of it, it is of the Father. Like, I think sometimes the word desire, there's certain connotations like, oh, if there is this strong calling that you feel pulled to, the prayer helps for sure, but I think to make that assumption that it's for some other, misguided reason, like, or it could just be from him directly to you saying, this is your path. Now I'm just waiting for you to take the next step. So I think really being open and listening to his steer in your life, and also trusting that, listen, as long as you're taking that next step forward, even if you're nervous, like, I don't know, is that him? Is that me? Like, take the step. He is a loving father. He will redirect you. You're like, nope, I don't think you heard me quite right. Like, you will get steered once more. So, it's hard for him to steer you when you're frozen, standing still.
Man, you're really preaching now. This
Oh, you're
is
gonna have to pull me back. Pull me back, Alex.
no, this is great. And it's so many things that you said that I relate with. For myself, I guess I would say for a couple of years, God had been giving me this vision, but I just felt like I can't do that. I'm not, who am I to do this? And I had to trust him and to realize that, hey, he's given me this thought and this vision for a reason and to step out on faith. So I really appreciate you saying this. I know this will resonate with other people because I know we're not the only ones that he loves and cares for. So he wants everybody else to be fulfilled in what they're doing. Going back to career and home, how can we find balance with our career and at home?
Absolutely. So I think I shared earlier, but I do feel so strongly this concept of work and home being in conflict, I do think is like this programming that we just have to like break through. So even the concept of, and I probably use the phrase all the time because people recognize it and it resonates with them, of work-life balance. If you think about it, like, balance, like, is that really what we're aiming for? Like, I want to aim for more than just like kind of being able to juggle multiple things. Like, really, what I think our aim should be is like whole life success, like success at work, success in life, and really synergy between the two. So rather than it being like, if you picture like a zero sum game, if I excel in my work, then I'm sacrificing my home life, my time with my family, or vice versa. It really doesn't need to be that way. And I have seen this in my clients, one after another. I've seen it in my own life that, when you're operating in alignment and staying true to your priorities and your values, and you're living out that purpose, you're walking this path that he's given you, it all falls into place. So if you're excelling in your work, you're doing this podcast, it's blessing people, that's going to fill you up so that when you turn to your family, you're like bursting with energy and they can read the joy in your face. And think about what example that sets for your child who will be watching you at every step. Like, how is dad doing this? So it's not just you in this life, it's like your legacy of all these lives to come, all the lives you're touching with the podcast. So that's just like one, direction. But then at home, like, if you're able to work with your mindset and any stress that you might feel, where you can be totally present with your family, that is filling you up so that when you turn to your work, you're not feeling like anyone's cheated. You're like, thank you, God, for that quality time with my family. Now I'm going to go be creative and make an impact in this world. Like, so there is this way of synergy, this like copacetic, everything working together and building you up so that you can pour more into this world. Like, that's the magic spot. And it may sound far off, like, I get it, and I have been there and I have lived like the daily grind, right? Like, how often do you hear that phrase, the hustle and grind? Like, we're striving, we're toiling, we're burning the midnight oil, and it feels like a rut, like Groundhog's Day. Every day is the same. You're like, when is this going to end? So I get how hard it can be, but I will just encourage you with, like, it's just a flip of a switch. It's like a small dial change that can just turn your perspective around on it all. So back to, trying to balance career and home, is recognizing that if you're doing the work you love, if you're following that purpose and you're making time for whatever it is that's most important to you, whether that's your family, if it's running, if it's whatever passions you have, you will find that your time and energy multiplies. And that's God's math. So when we talk about zero-sum game, like if I add here, I subtract here, he's like in the world of multiplication. So no, like if you're appreciating your blessings and you're using your talents, it all multiplies.
So, what are some tips we need to use to have a healthy life balance?
Yeah. So I would say a couple tips. First, just in terms of starting small, right? This isn't like a overnight, my work and life, everything just fell into place. So I would start with like just small experiments to see what works for you. Even things just like unplugging, right? Like some people are great about saying like, oh, I'll have less stress if I check email on my phone for work just before bed. That may be great for someone. For someone else, that may get them so riled up and they can't fall asleep then. So like just knowing, and again, you can try different ways, do it for a week, see how that went for you, whether it's putting like hard boundaries on no screens, all work is off from this hour to this hour. So I'd say doing small experiments with just finding more of that joy in your life and more of the synergy between work and home. Second, I would say is just make sure that you're crystal clear on your priorities. So often we just kind of take a page from whoever's around us and start mimicking how they balance, how they schedule their lives or fill their time. So I would challenge you to like really get crisp of like, if I had to rank order, whatever it is, I'll tell you my list, but if it's faith, then my marriage, then my children, my extended family, my work and my community, and then knowing that health it like has to be with me or I can't do any of the above. Like, so that's just a list to give you an idea, but to get really crisp, and that's just for you so that and then see what tweaks need to happen in your life to be more in line with those priorities. Even small changes, you're going to realize, oh my god, I had so much conflict because I wasn't putting him first, or work had squeezed out everything else. So even just getting a little bit closer, you're going to feel such release and such freedom, I think, come back to you. And the last thing I would say, so number 3, is just getting really crisp on what is like your big reason why. So if like work-life balance, call it, or whole life success is a challenge for you, like, why do you even want to get to the bottom of it? Like, what makes that problematic for you, even just beyond the daily stress? For me, and I hinted at it earlier, it really was setting an example for my kids. Like when I think of my son and his future, I would never want him to feel in a prison, in a job that he hated, and keep living that way because he thought there was no other way to do it. Or this is my lot in life. This is my luck. This is the hand I was given. I have to stay here. That breaks my heart, right? So sometimes I think, if you're a parent, think about your kids in that situation. You're paving the way for them and everyone else you come into contact with. Because, by the way, people will take notice and they're going to want to know, what are you doing differently? And that gives you a beautiful opportunity to share your story, share your testimony, share your faith even. So yeah, a couple of tips to kind of get you going.
Yeah, that's such good advice. So, what is one piece of advice you would give to someone trying to find their purpose?
So I would say, we live like really busy lives, right? And there is so much noise coming at us from every direction. Everybody's got an opinion of how your life back to the should be, what you should be doing, what others are doing around you. And I would just encourage you to like carve out time by yourself in stillness to listen to that voice inside. And depending on who you are, you may call it your gut, your intuition, the Holy Spirit, but it's the truth inside you, I can't tell you what it is, that's going to say like, this, where am I being pulled? Where am I being called? Because I gotta tell, like, it may sound small to start. We all have like a God-sized calling on our life, and it's big, like bigger than we can even fathom. So if you could just tune in a little bit, and even if that voice is telling you just the next step, just take it. Like, take that leap of faith, be obedient. You can always take a step in a different direction next. Like, nothing, this is not perfection. This is just moving forward and tuning out some of the noise that can sometimes dull our senses, to really listen to what's inside you and take the leap to follow it.
That is such a great way to end the show. It's so important to remember that we have to take a leap of faith. We can't expect change if we're just going to sit in the same place. Cheri, thank you so much for sitting down with us today. You have blessed us and inspired us to be successful at home and in our careers. Before we wrap up, I have 2 questions that I always ask my guests. Question 1, who or what is pouring into you right now?
Oh man, that's a tough one because I feel like I'm just sitting here catching so much information, knowledge, wisdom, blessings from so many people. But I'll share with you the last book that I read, which I loved, and it's called The 10X Rule by Grant Cardone. And it's all about just kind of thinking bigger. So it kind of challenges the notion that so often if we're feeling limited, and I think this so often applies to folks looking at work and life, those limits are often ones that we've applied on ourselves. So I think it's just a great, like, a book that will challenge you to just think bigger. So if it's the podcast, like, maybe it's your book next, maybe it's your live TV show, but, and again, not to strive or to reach some standard, but just if your goal is to have an impact on this generation and ones to come, maybe this is just chapter 1.
Come on now. I like the sound of that. So let's go to question 2. What are you doing right now to pour into this world?
Yeah. So one of the ways is really with my business. So the coaching that I'm doing with individuals and coaching programs that I'm offering, I think that is the gift that I have to give right now, which you could call it coaching. It's also healing. It's also helping you find your purpose. But I'd love to pour into the listeners of the Poor Generation. I have this fun little tool. It's almost like a quiz, that you can take for free. It takes a couple minutes. It's very entertaining, by the way, but it will give you a steer on where there may be aspects of your life that are out of alignment and how small tweaks can increase your satisfaction right off the bat.
Okay, cool. So can you let the listeners know where they can follow you on social media and your website?
Absolutely. So to get that quiz, I want to make sure if that sounds interesting to you, you can check it out. So that's at lovethislifecoaching.com/quiz. And then on Instagram, you can find me at How to Love This Life.
Thank you so much for sitting down with us today, Cheri.
Alex, thank you for having me. You are such a blessing. Thank you for doing this. I'm going to keep tuning in and look forward to staying connected.
Man, thank you so much for those kind words. Listeners, I have a couple key takeaways I want to leave you with. Remember, you are in the driver's seat of your life. So if you are struggling to find your purpose, take 5 or 10 minutes each day to design your ideal day and strive to live that out. Next, don't dwell on your should haves. Try embracing where you are right now in this moment and absorb that you are enough and that you are loved. Also, are you putting your beliefs and values into practice on a daily basis? If not, think of ways to implement them throughout your week. If you are still listening, I want to give you a huge thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in today's episode. Please follow us on Instagram, The Poor Generation. Like, share, and comment. Also, please do me a huge favor and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. The reviews help this podcast to grow and it helps to reach new listeners. The holidays are approaching really fast, so please be mindful of the ways that you can give back to your community, like cooking a meal for a neighbor or helping out at your local shelter. I want to end the show by saying that you are loved and that you do have a purpose. You do have unique gifts and talents to offer this world. I love you, and I will see you in the next episode. That is a wrap on episode 9. Thank you so much.